kind of, after your children's story, I kept thinking, I should be back in teaching economics in the classroom again. Diminishing marginal utility is what it was all about. That would be a good story to teach kids that concept, wouldn't it? Okay. When we look around the world today, it's an interesting world, isn't it? Quite a scary world, actually, at the moment, with what's going on. You know, I see people warn. We have a financial crisis, even though most of us don't probably realise at the moment. And whether it's going to get much worse, we probably will. Photo there of all the ships lined up outside Shanghai. One of the problems that's causing the financial crisis is the supply chain. And Shanghai is only one place in the world where the supply chain is being held up. They tell me that the lockdown's finished in Shanghai and hopefully the port is reopening and these goods are flowing again around the world. But in many parts of the world, the goods are just not getting to where people want them to get because there's not the people and the ships to get them there. They tell us that over 6 million people have died as a result of the plague that's hit us. And so we've still got the aftermath of that happening around us. And then the next crisis that they're trying to pump on us is that, you know, the problem with global warming is that we're all going to fry to death eventually. Our political masters love to keep us in a state of fear. Be aware of that. You're much easier to control when you're fearful. So if they can scare you, they will. And that's not really my warning for today, but I think it's one thing that we should be aware of and notice. And so when I was looking through parts of the Bible, I thought the part that came to me was 1 Peter chapter 1. I thought, now, you may read it and not think that it's applicable to our day and age, but when I read 1 Peter chapter 1, I looked at that and I thought, yeah, this sort of sums up a lot of what is the worry and the fear that we as Christians in today's world have to face. I love that painting there, Peter. He was Matthias Stom. So it's over 400 years old, that painting. And I like the way he's got that weather-beaten old Galilean fisherman look to him there. When we get to the new world, you know, when we see what these people actually look like, won't it be fascinating? But I think Matthias has got him summed up quite well. Peter is an amazing guy. He had, an amazing life. What he experienced, the impetuous Peter, and when he wrote 1 Peter, it's called a Catholic epistle. Nothing to do with the Catholic Church, but Catholic meaning universal. When he writes, he's not writing, when Paul writes to the Corinthians or the Galatians, he's writing to a specific church about a specific problem that was happening in that church. A lot of it we can read as we go, right, it's very useful for us 2,000 years later. When Peter wrote, he names all the churches there, but he names a whole lot of them. It was a letter that was written to a whole area. And so it's not a letter written specifically. And it's a letter also written to the Gentiles. Who are the Gentiles? That's us. We're all Gentiles because we're non-Jewish. There might be someone with Jewish background here, I don't know, but we're all Gentiles. And so he's writing to the non-Jewish believers in the church early on. And so we can take it as a letter that's written to us in our day and age, and especially chapter 1. And he says there, I have written and sent this short letter to you with the help of Silas, whom I commend to you as a faithful brother. My purpose is writing is to encourage you and to assure you that what you are experiencing is truly part of God's grace for you. Stand firm in this grace. It's a wonderful text to open it up with, isn't it? Well, this is actually from later on, chapter 5. But I put it in there because Who does he say helps write the letter? There's been a number of theologians who look at the Greek in 1 Peter and they go, well, it couldn't have been written by Peter because Peter is Galilean fisherman. Greek wasn't his first language even. And yet it's probably the most perfect Greek in the whole of the New Testament. It's written, I used to have a teacher, Pastor Alfred Kranz, many years ago, who was very fluent in New Testament Greek. And he used to talk about Paul's letters. He said, if he had been one of my students, I would have made him go back and rewrite it. And, Peter even says about Paul, some of the things he writes are hard to understand. And it's not the easiest Greek to follow, not that I can read it. But this is evidently, they tell me, the purest Greek. And the reason that it is that way is that Silas, or Silvanus might have it. And you know who Silas was, don't you? Silas was at Philippi with Paul when the earthquake struck. He was known in the early church as a good leader, and he was a very well-educated man, so it makes sense. So we can believe that it's still Peter's letter. It's not like some of the others that said, oh, well, it's not Peter, so therefore we should throw it out of the New Testament. No, it was, but Peter probably spoke it to Silas, who wrote it down for him while he was in jail, and that letter got sent out and it became very valued. Silas, I like this. You can see this, sometimes, actually in Jew, he was Saul, which becomes Silas, which becomes Silvanus in the Roman way of putting it. And you see him holding the chains. The old painters used to always put a little key in the painting so that we'd know who they were. And so when you had somebody holding chains like that, that's Silas. It harks back to his day in Philippi. And beginning the letter itself says, this letter is from Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ. What does he mean by an apostle? The apostle, to be an apostle, you had to be one who had witnessed Jesus Christ firsthand. The death, the resurrection, and those things. Now we know Peter, was he there when Jesus died? No, he had fled and he'd gone. He'd denied his Lord, but he, with very bitter regret about that, wasn't it? We know that Peter was so upset. And so he says, I am writing to God's chosen people who are living as foreigners in the provinces of Wairarapa, Manawatu. Well, could well have been, but these are the places in Asia Minor where he was right. God the Father knew you and chose you long ago. You ever think about that? Here you are in Masterton, but God knew you long ago and he chose that you would be here today and that you would be one of his children. It's not just by chance, you are here by choice. Hopefully your own choice, but most of all because of God's choice and that he chose you. You're his children. And God the Father knew and chose you long ago, and his Spirit has made you holy. As a result, you have obeyed him and have been cleansed by the blood of Jesus Christ. And then I like the way Peter says this, he says, may God give you more and more grace and peace. I don't think there'd be anybody here that would say, I don't need more grace and peace. We all need grace and peace. And I like the way Peter says this, and the way that Paul emphasises it in his letters as well. We are recipients of God's grace. We don't earn anything, we don't deserve anything, he just gives it to us. And this is what Peter's wishing upon these people that were there. They lived in an interesting part of the world, what would now be Turkey. And he's thinking of them and what they are going through. And here specifically is why he is thinking of them. The letter was written probably about AD 65, but this happened in AD 64. If you want the precise date, 19th of July, AD 64. And you know what it was, don't you? The Great Fire of Rome. Interesting when the great fight, we sometimes think of Nero fiddling while, you've seen pictures, paintings of Nero playing the fiddle while Rome burns? I'm sorry, but that's fiction. We have no evidence that that actually happened at all. But the fire burst out in some of the tenements where the poorer people lived in Rome, and it started spreading. And there's no, even though he didn't play the fiddle, Nero was delighted because he wanted to build bigger, flasher, more permanent buildings than the ones that were on fire. And after 3 days, the fire started to die down, and then men appeared, and they started to take the firefighters away, and they started to spread the flames again. And the fire flared up for about another 3 days and burned. They were probably there because of Nero. So even though he didn't start it, he was delighted that the city was burning. And pretty soon the story got out around Rome that, blaming Nero for burning Rome, which you can understand. And so when you're in a tight spot, what do we often still do today when we're in line, being lined up for the blame for something? we still do it, don't we? It was his fault. So he finds someone else to blame, and it's the Christians he finds to blame. The Romans didn't sort of differentiate between the Christians and the Jews largely this time in history. They didn't understand that there was a difference. But what they knew is amongst this group of Christians, they used to talk about the end of the world coming through fire. And they were totally unreliable because they talked about drinking blood and eating the flesh and things like that. Well, these guys are prime suspects. And so Nero deflects the blame onto the Christians. And and it's not just a persecution, the first of the persecutions occurred. Christian persecutions occurred over a number of years in various places, various intensities. And so Nero kicks off the persecution of the Christians. And so Peter is writing to these people because the persecutions were spreading into Asia Minor. I like this reconstruction, if you want to know what they think Nero looked like. Interesting character. He's when Paul's before Festus, and Festus is waiting for a bit of a kickback, a handback before you'll let him off, That's the way justice was done in those days. You give me enough money and I'll let you go. And when he doesn't get let go, Paul says, I appeal unto Caesar. And so Festus says, you've appealed to Caesar you'll go. That's the Caesar. It's Nero. He was only 17 when he became emperor. His mother, Agrippina, had married Claudius. And then so Claudius had adopted him as his heir and successor. And so when Claudius dies, Nero becomes Caesar. And when he first became Caesar, a lot of his advisors were very wise in the things that they'd tell him to do, he did. And so he got a bit of a reputation for doing good things. And so poor old Paul is obviously told, well, hang on, he's doing good things, he's letting people off. But how long did it take him to get from Caesarea all the way through to Rome? Probably a year or so, didn't it? By the time the maggot in Nero's brain had moved a little bit, and he was no longer being good towards Christians, he was persecuting them no end. And I don't know, it's amazing how they can look at people and say what they think they look like, isn't it? And so the persecution started, and it was a terrible time for Christians. Some of them ended up being fed to the lions. Others were put on crosses and covered in tar and set fire to. Nero used to do that to light up his garden parties at night. The cruelty of some of these people is unbelievable. And so Nero, he literally was mad. When you look at everything that he got up to, you'd have to say this. And finally, he died by suicide because all the palace turned against him and they had enough of him. And so this is the situation when Peter's writing, because he's got a group of these Christians who are facing persecution. We don't know what persecution is in this country. You come here today on the Sabbath day and nobody stops you. You might cop a little bit of ridicule from time to time, or you're one of those 7-day wonders or something like that, you know. But by and large, we can live a life at the moment where we don't suffer from persecution. Back in those days, depending on how dedicated the governor was, some governors didn't bother to persecute the Christians, just let them go. Others made a point of persecuting the Christians and giving them a hard life. And so Peter's writing to encourage those who might come in contact and be asked, you know, do you confess that Caesar is Lord? And all you needed to do was a pinch of incense and say Caesar is Lord, and that's it. You go on your way free, don't worry. But those who believed that Jesus Christ is the only Lord and Saviour wouldn't do that, and they often had to pay with their lives. As I say, at the moment we're lucky we don't know, but who knows what can happen. 100 years ago, this country was largely Christian. Most people would put on the census form they were Christian, and most of them probably did attend church. Now, Christianity is a minority in New Zealand. We don't know how long we have freedom of worship, but the day will come when we may have to answer for our beliefs. How would you do it? How will you respond? And we need to think about that. Peter says in verses 3 to 5, he says, all praise to God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. It is by his great mercy that we have been born again. Because God raised Jesus Christ from the dead, now we live with great expectation, and we have a priceless inheritance, an inheritance that is kept in heaven for you, pure and undefiled, beyond the reach of change and decay, and through your faith God is protecting you by his power until you receive this salvation, which is ready to be revealed on the last day for all to see. We live with great expectation. Do we as Christians live with great expectation? We should do. We should do. Because we have a belief that this world is not the end. It'll only be the beginning for us. And he's reminding them that there is great reward in being a Christian. Sometimes we forget about that. We think, no, there's all these things I can't do or whatever. That's what Christianity is about. But when we understand there is great reward, often it's the reward that can help keep us going. And what Peter's trying to do is, I want to encourage you so that you keep faithful and that you keep going to the very end. When I was, it would be in the late 1950s. I don't like admitting to how old I might be. But when I was a kid, I used to have terrible asthma, and they didn't have the puffers that they have now. You know, you get asthma, and once you had asthma, you had it for days. And you just couldn't breathe properly. I was telling Rosalind that Dr. Adlam, I still remember his name, he used to tell my mother, if he's really bad, you just ring me and I'll come around any time, day or night. Does your doctor say that to you? No, they don't now, do they? And he would turn up at home in the middle of the night, and I don't know what the injection was, but it was a great big needle, and he'd give it to me in my rear end there, and it would be painful, but I didn't care, because it would sort of knock you out, and when you woke up, you were all relaxed, and the asthma seemed to have gone. Well, one day we were at big camp there at Ardmore, and I came down with asthma, and it was bad. I remember lying in the tent, and those of you that, anybody here from Ardmore days and remember the old Grand Prix used to be held at Ardmore, and the cars would be going round and round, and you'd hear this noise in the background, and I remember thinking, I wish they'd just shut up. I just want to be able to breathe. And my dad came into the tent and he said, I'm going to tell you, brother, he said, to bring you an electric train set when he comes back from Sydney. Well, did the trick, you know. I didn't immediately get better, but suddenly I dwelt on that thought, an electric train set. What amazing. And I did get better after a day or two. But it was just the promise of a reward, of something better that just gave me the will to keep on going. I've never forgotten that. Sometimes that's what we need to keep going. And when you think life's tough here, remember that it's not the end. Talks about in Hebrews 11 there, it says, and even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived by faith. For he was like a foreigner living in tents, and so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. And there's a word that describes us in this world, describes Abraham and these people when they're in a land where they don't actually belong. Can you think of the word when we're here and we're passing through? We are sojourners. Thanks, God. We are sojourners. And we sometimes need to realise during difficult times like we're going through at the moment, when the world seems so unstable, when things seem so temporary, that we really in this world, we are just sojourners. We are just passing through. We need to make certain that we don't put our roots down too far in this world, because we sometimes want to cling on. Colin mentioned, was it Lot and Lot's wife this morning during the Sabbath school lesson? What was the trouble with Lot's wife? She put her roots down in a city where she didn't really belong. And as a result, cost her life. So we are sojourners in this world. And that's what Peter is saying to the people at his time, that were, you know, when things are tough, don't worry, because you're really just sojourners. You're just travelling through. And things are going to get better, and you are going to have huge reward if you are faithful. And he says this, so be truly glad. There is wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show you that your faith is genuine. I find it hard to be truly glad during trials. But what we've got to realise is that it's trials that toughen us up and refine us. And so Paul and Peter both say, you know, we need to be really glad about when we're tested. James says the same thing. You know, he says, for you know when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. When things are tough, we will develop endurance, and that will make us better people for it. Our character will be toughened for the really tough times. So James says, dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. So when troubles come your way, tell yourself, because it won't come naturally to you, this is an opportunity for great joy. It will toughen me up. Marie Durant. She was an amazing lady, this one. She was a Huguenot girl, and they were being persecuted. The Huguenots were being persecuted in France for their faith. In 1730, she was locked in a tower at Constance because she wouldn't recant her faith. Her brother, he was executed. He was a preacher, Huguenot preacher. Her father was locked up for many years. He wasn't released until he was in his 90s. So when in 1730, with the age of 19, she was locked up in this tower with other women who were likewise women and children. And all she needed to do to be able to get her freedom was every day she was asked by the governor of the prison, do you recant? And every day she would say, no, I don't recant. She adhered. She kept the faith. And so she should have been enjoying a good life, but here she was in a tower. There's the tower. Blazing hot in summer, freezing cold and wet in winter. And she was in there. And she wasn't released until 1768, 38 years, when a new governor arrived in the province. And when he heard of her situation, he felt sorry. He said, no, she doesn't deserve this. And he released her. And so she went home to her house eventually. And she received a pension from the Huguenot church, not a very large one. And she discovered her next door neighbour had also been released. He was 92. And so she shared her pension with a 92-year-old Huguenot believer until she died. There's a drawing of her when she was an old lady. What faith to be able to go, no, I don't recant, and to keep saying that, knowing all you needed to do was those two words. In fact, they tell me if you go to that tower, you'll see scraped into the wall of it, into the stone, registrar, which means resist. So some of them did it to try and encourage each other, don't give up. We need to be steadfast. And so this is what Peter's trying to tell the people of his day. Don't give up. Be steadfast. Resist the urge to give in. Because if we don't give in and we're faithful, there is great reward for us. Put all your hope in the gracious salvation that will come to you when Jesus Christ is revealed to the world. So he doesn't say put some of your hope or a little bit of hope. He says put all of your hope in the gracious salvation. We can look forward to the things that are happening in this world today because we know that the gracious salvation will be revealed to us and given to us if we're faithful and if we hang in till the very end. I like the squirrel. Isn't it so true? Looking forward with hope helps us endure. When we look forward with hope and we don't give up on the dreams that we have for the future and the belief that we have, what is faith? I listened during this COVID time, I listened to Andrew West preaching. I didn't go to Tauranga, but I listened to one of his sermons, and I liked the way that he's talking about righteousness by faith. And he described faith as just simply having confidence in Jesus and what he says. Having confidence in Jesus Christ that when he says he will save us and has saved us, that this is exactly what he has done. How often do we have to renew our faith? Once a year? Every day. Every day. And every day you do that, it will strengthen your faith and your confidence in Jesus Christ. For you know that God paid a ransom to save you from the empty life you inherited from your ancestors. Who is he writing to? Gentiles, isn't it? So he's really describing the Gentile life as an empty life. And it was not paid with mere gold or silver, which lose their value. It was the precious blood of Christ, the sinless, spotless Lamb of God. The life of this world, the Christless life, is an empty life. What does Paul say? You know, if I have no hope in this world, I am of all men most miserable. Because if you don't believe that there's a better life to come, how do you know, and so many people, you know, in the world today, you go into the schools and what's taught? Evolution is fact. You came here as a result of some mistake in the... and when you go, that's it. And if you believe that this world and this life is the only thing that there is, Paul would be saying you've inherited an empty life. And we can make the choice whether we accept the empty life or whether we accept a life, you know. Christless life offers no hope. Whoops, don't know how that one got in there. We'll come to it again. When I was younger, we used to get the JMV hall at the big camp. We used to sing a song. I met Jesus at the crossroads, where the two ways meet. See, someone knows it. I should get you to come and sing it. Satan there was standing there. He said, "Come this way." It's about making a choice, isn't it? We all come to the crossroads every day of our lives. And we need to make the choice who we're going to serve that day. Wouldn't it be interesting if we just did come to the crossroads, the once saved, always saved mentality? You come to the crossroads, you made the choice, and then away you go and do what you like. That's not what it's about. It's committing your life to Jesus Christ and following him. And so there's that song talks about a better life, a reward. And Paul says, for you have been born again, but not to a life that will quickly end. Your new life will last forever because it comes from the eternal, living Word of God. Do you believe that? If you believe that, then you know the reward you are heading to. You know that this world is not what it's all about. You know that there's a better world to come. And it helps you to just carry on. You know the guy there with the walking frame? Billy Graham, isn't it? And you know the guy on the right-hand side? Albert Einstein. When Billy Graham was 92, and he was asked by the people of Charlotte, where he lived, they wanted to honour him, but they knew that he was very weak because the Parkinson's that he had near the end was taking its toll. And so they said, we'd like to honour you, Dr. Graham. Please come. And if you want to speak, you are welcome to speak. But please let us honour you. And so he said, yeah, okay, I will come. So he they had a big dinner there, and a lot of the notable people of the town got up and they spoke about Billy Graham and honoured him for the things that he had done. And they gave him the opportunity to speak. And he got up and he spoke. And even though he was very, very frail, it wasn't long before he died, he got up and he spoke. And he said, I want to tell you a story about Albert Einstein. He said Albert Einstein, who lived in Princeton, was catching a train from Princeton to somewhere else. And he was sitting on the train when the conductor came through the carriage, collecting the tickets and punching them. And when he came to Albert Einstein, because Albert Einstein was a bit absent-minded, as you can imagine, most of these intelligent people seem to be. And he looked for the ticket, and he looked for it in his top pocket, and and he couldn't find the ticket. And he looked on the seat next door, and he looked in his bag, and he was searching for this ticket, and the conductor said, don't worry, Dr. Einstein. He said, I know who you are, and I know you would have bought a ticket. And Einstein sort of looked at him and then acknowledged, grateful acknowledgement that the guy was not going to chuck him off the train. And the conductor went further down the carriage collecting tickets. And when he just about to leave the carriage, he looked back, and there was Einstein on the floor on all fours, looking for his ticket. That's not it. But he was looking for his ticket. And so the conductor went back and he said to Einstein, Dr. Einstein, it is okay. I know who you are. I know you bought the ticket. There is no need to worry about it. And he said, Einstein looked up and said to him, well, I know who I am, but I don't know where I'm going. And Billy Graham said, I want you all to know, he says, I bought this suit. It's a brand new suit. So I could have a new, because my family have been telling me that I've been dressing a little bit slovenly lately. So I have a new suit so I can come and address you today. And he said, it will get a little bit more use because this is the suit I'm going to be buried in. And he said, but I want you to know that I know who I am and I know where I am going. That was his message to them. And so and he said this, I not only know who I am, I also know where I'm going. May your troubles be less, your blessings more, and may nothing but happiness come through your door. Life without God is like an unsharpened pencil. It has no point. And I think really that's what Peter is telling them in Asia Minor when they're facing the persecution, is that life without Jesus has no point. Life with him has all the purpose that you can ever imagine it to have. And you didn't know, what did I say it was called? The Catholic Epistle. So here it is, the Epistle to the Saints at Masterton in 2022. what is the message that he's giving to them that he could also giving to us here today in Masterton? See, I knew that photo would come in handy. You didn't realise that Peter had a photo of the park at Masterton. And this is what the message that he has for us. He says, God chose you and has saved you. Don't doubt it. We are chosen. He picked us out. We're not here by chance. No matter what happens in this world, he is with you. Knowing that we've got someone to go through the troubles with us when they come and is always there to be with us is of great strength. And we need to never forget that. What happens in this world is transient. We sometimes think what happens in this world is what really matters. And when you look at it really, no, it doesn't. What happens in this world is only just comes and goes. But if we're faithful, we'll enter a world that's not transient anymore. It'll be permanent. And our eyes have not seen and our ears heard, hasn't entered into our hearts those things which God has prepared for us. We are sojourners in this world. We are just passing through. Don't put your roots down. If having that big property or having that flash car or what it's all about, you're starting to put your roots down in this world. You can't take it with you. Keep your eyes fixed on him. What did Paul say? He's the author and the finisher of our faith. And so it begins with him and it ends with him. And it ends well with him because he will take us to be with him forever. Be steadfast. Stand firm in his grace. What did he say? My grace is sufficient for you. No matter what comes our way, God will give us enough grace to withstand whatever it is. We can be rest assured in that. He will not allow us to be tested above what we are able. So he will manage it for us if we have faith and belief in him. And what we need to remember is Christ will soon return and bring great reward to the faithful. We look around the world today, and I know there's some people who are trying to put dates on when, how long it will be before Jesus comes. I don't know. All I know is that Jesus will return at the right time. And I leave that for him to decide when the right time is. God alone knows when the right time will be. We can look around and we can see the signs and we have warnings about those and we need to be ready. But when he does come, we know that his reward is with him and we will all be greatly rewarded if we hold steadfast. God bless you. And let's finish by singing hymn number 600, I think it is. And it's one which some of you will know, which is Hold Fast Till I Come.